A single violent moment, an explosion, a shocking headline. It's an act designed not just to destroy but to send a chilling message of fear, to tear apart our sense of safety, to force change through bloodshed and terror. This is the world of terrorism. It feels so modern, so much a part of our current anxieties. Yet its origins stretch back further than many of us realize, winding through centuries of human conflict. Think about it, a world where fear isn't just a side effect of war, but the weapon itself. From daggers hidden in ancient marketplaces to the digital networks that now crisscross the globe, the deliberate use of violence to hit political, ideological, or religious targets has a long, dark, and incredibly complex past. It's the story of how an ancient tactic morphed into one of the toughest and most persistent threats we face today. The actual word terrorism is pretty new, popping up during the French Revolution's reign of terror in the late 1700s, but the practice that's way older. Back in the 1st century CE, the Sicarii, Jewish zealots fighting Roman rule in Judea, used hidden daggers, sicae, to take out Roman officials and their supporters in crowded public areas. Their goal wasn't just to kill enemies. It was to stir up a bigger rebellion and scare anyone who sided with Rome. Fast forward a few centuries between the 11th and 13th centuries, and you find the Hashashin. They were a secretive Ismaili Shia group in Persia and Syria using similar methods. Often called the assassins, they carried out targeted killings of political and religious figures who stood against them. Their attacks were carefully planned, often done in public at great personal risk, which built up this powerful, terrifying image around them. These early examples, even though they're from different times and places, show us a key idea: using violence strategically to create a psychological impact that's far bigger than the act itself. And let's not forget state terror. That's got ancient roots too. Rulers like Roman emperors and China's Qin dynasty used systematic violence to silence dissent and hold on to their power. The 19th century really shook things up. New political ideas, especially anarchism and nationalism, started to spread, and at the same time, technology was leaping forward. This mix changed the face of terror. Anarchist thinkers in Europe and Russia were calling for the state to be overthrown. Some groups like Narodnaya Volya, People's Will in Russia, embraced what they called propaganda by the deed. They believed that violent attacks on government figures could show how vulnerable the state was and spark a mass revolution. They often targeted officials and symbols of power, sometimes trying to avoid harming ordinary people. This era also gave us dynamite, thanks to Alfred Nobel. He meant it for industry, but it quickly became a favorite tool for those wanting to make their violent message louder. Dynamite was relatively stable, easy to carry, and incredibly destructive. It meant small groups or even just one person could cause massive damage. So the late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a string of bombings and assassinations by anarchist and nationalist groups across Europe and America. This, understandably, made people very anxious and led to government crackdowns. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 by a nationalist group, a clear act of political terrorism, famously lit the fuse for World War I. This period really cemented the idea of terrorism as a brutal, destabilizing, but for some effective tool for political change. The middle of the 20th century added new layers to terrorism. The world wars had, in a grim way, normalized violence on an industrial scale and blurred the lines between soldiers and civilians, a lesson some revolutionary groups later took to heart. After World War II, we saw decolonization movements sweep across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Groups fighting for independence from colonial rulers sometimes used guerrilla warfare and tactics that their opponents quickly labeled as terrorism. How you saw these acts often depended on your politics. One person's freedom fighter was another's terrorist. The Cold War complicated things even more. With the world split between the US and the Soviet Union, both superpowers and their allies backed various regimes and rebel groups around the globe. Sometimes this support went to groups using terrorist tactics, which really muddied the waters of international law and who was responsible for what. State-sponsored terrorism became a more obvious tactic, with countries like Iran, Libya, and North Korea later accused of supporting terrorist organizations to achieve their goals without direct military fights. The 1970s and 80s saw terrorism go international. Groups like the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO), the Irish Republican Army (IRA), the Basque ETA, and the Red Brigades in Italy carried out notorious hijackings, bombings, and assassinations. Their attacks often hit civilians and were designed to grab global media headlines. They used the growing power of TV and news networks to broadcast their cause and spread fear far beyond where the attack actually happened. Technology, like better weapons and global communication, was again a major factor. The late 20th and early 21st centuries brought the chilling rise of religiously motivated terrorism on a global scale, with al-Qaeda as the most devastating example. Religious reasons had been part of terrorism before, but groups like al-Qaeda, pushing an extremist view of Islam, had a new level of worldwide organization and ambition. Their ideology was all about a supposed global fight against the West and Muslim regimes they considered apostate. The September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States were a terrible turning point. Al-Qaeda's coordinated hijackings, the destruction of the World Trade Center, and the damage to the Pentagon showed a new ability to cause mass casualties, killing nearly 3,000 people. These attacks kicked off the US-led global war on terror, leading to military action in Afghanistan and Iraq, and a massive international effort to take down terrorist networks and their funding. After 9/11's terrorist tactics evolved. Groups became more decentralized. The threat of lone wolf attackers, people radicalized often online who act on their own without direct orders from a larger group, grew quite a bit. This change made it even harder for intelligence agencies to detect and prevent attacks. The 21st century has been completely reshaped by the internet and social media, and terrorist groups have been quick to use these new tools. Platforms that connect billions of people around the world have become fertile ground for radicalization, recruitment, spreading propaganda, and even planning operations. Groups like ISIS, Daesh, became experts at using high-quality online propaganda to inspire followers and claim responsibility for attacks globally, often drawing in people who had radicalized themselves online. The geographic focus of terrorism has shifted too. While the Middle East is still a very volatile area, the Sahel region in Africa has become a new hotspot, with groups linked to al-Qaeda and ISIS taking advantage of weak governments and local problems to grow their influence. Terrorism today is more diverse and fragmented. In Western countries, we've seen a comeback of domestic terrorism, driven by various political, racial, or ideological motives, including extreme right-wing, left-wing, and anti-government views. These threats often come from lone actors or small scattered cells that are tougher to track. The ideologies can be all over the place and sometimes overlap, often fueled by online conspiracy theories. The number of countries seeing at least one terrorist attack has also gone up in recent years, showing that the threat is spreading wider geographically, even if the total number of deaths goes up and down. And now, new technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, autonomous systems like drones, and even electric vehicles could be exploited by terrorists. AI could be used to make cyber attacks stronger, spread disinformation more effectively, or even guide autonomous weapons. Because these technologies are becoming more accessible, non-state actors are getting more tech-savvy than ever. There's also a worrying trend of younger people, even minors, being exposed to and getting involved in terrorism-related activities, often through online radicalization. Understanding this long and complicated evolution isn't just for academics. Terrorism isn't one single thing. It's a dynamic, adaptive set of tactics and ideas that keeps changing as our world changes. Its stories are diverse, its players varied, and its impact is huge. Staying informed, thinking critically to resist simplistic stories and online propaganda, and supporting efforts that get to the root causes of radicalization, from political grievances to social isolation, are all essential. The story of terrorism is still being written, and our collective understanding and watchfulness are key to shaping a safer future. From ancient zealots to modern digital networks, the heart of terrorism is still the strategic use of fear. Tactics have changed from daggers and dynamite to cyber warfare and complex global operations. Motivations have included religious extremism, political revolution, ethno-nationalism, and a whole host of other ideologies. But the goal to use violence to make a bigger psychological and political splash, that remains. As technology speeds up and the world becomes more interconnected, the challenge of countering terrorism will only get more complex. It demands a many-sided approach that combines security measures with a real commitment to understanding and tackling the ever-changing forces that fuel this ancient and evolving threat. The story is far from over, or is far from